Former U.S. President Donald Trump is facing fierce criticism following his incendiary remarks about Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, branding him a dictator and accusing him of mismanaging his war-torn nation.
Some breaking news now, and Downing Street says Sir Keir Starmer has spoken to Volodymyr Zelenskyy tonight after Donald Trump accused him of being a dictator. Number 10 says the Prime Minister expressed his support for President Zelenskyy as Ukraine's democratically elected leader and said that it was perfectly reasonable to suspend elections during wartime, as has happened. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, joins me now from Westminster. John, tell us more about this.
This is a very public show of support for President Zelenskyy in the face of the attacks, the increasingly loud attacks and vitriolic attacks on him by President Trump, the latest in which he's called him a dictator. So the number 10 have just revealed in the last few minutes that the Prime Minister and President Zelenskyy have spoken on the phone and stressed the need for everyone to work together, In other words, the Europeans being involved in the peace process as well, such as it is. Now, that key sentence, the Prime Minister expressed his support for President Zelenskyy as Ukraine's democratically elected leader, not a dictator, as President Trump said he was earlier on this evening. Said it was perfectly reasonable to suspend elections during wartime, as the UK did during World War II. President Trump complained that there hadn't been elections, and that was why he was calling Zelenskyy a dictator. Then the PM said, according to number 10, the Prime Minister reiterated his support for the US-led efforts to get a lasting peace in Ukraine that deterred Russia from any future aggression. So, although otherwise a deal that lasts and that Russia doesn't come back with a further invasion. Remember, the Prime Minister spoke on Monday evening after those talks, those crisis talks in Paris, about the need for the Americans to provide what he called a backstop to support any troops that might go into Ukraine. British troops, he said he was considering putting troops on the ground in Ukraine, but he talked about a backstop. So, very public support from our Prime Minister here in the UK for President Zelenskyy. Not exactly a slapdown for President Trump, but a firm reaffirmation of the UK position, backing President Zelenskyy in the face of those attacks by President Trump.
UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has expressed support for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, stating it is perfectly reasonable to suspend elections during wartime, drawing parallels to the UK's actions during World War I. This statement comes in response to US President Donald Trump's recent remarks labeling Zelenskyy a dictator for postponing elections amid the ongoing Russian invasion. Trump's comments, delivered via his Truth Social platform, claimed that Zelenskyy had done a terrible job and warned that he needed to move fast or he's not going to have a country left. The remarks, which echo Kremlin propaganda, have sparked outrage among political leaders and military experts on both sides of the Atlantic, who fear they could embolden Russian President Vladimir Putin and destabilize NATO's collective security.
We're hearing that Russia wants to force Ukraine to hold new elections in order to sign any kind of a peace deal. Is that something that the U.S. would ever support?
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, or essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating, and where a country has been blown to smithereens. You got most of the cities are laying on their sides. The buildings are collapsed. It looks like a massive demolition site. The whole, I mean, so many of the cities. I mean, they haven't done it in Kiev because I guess they don't want to shoot too many rockets in there. They've done it 20%, but they haven't done it 100%. If they wanted to do it 100%, it would probably happen very quickly. But you have cities that are absolutely decimated. And yeah, I would say that, you know, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people have to, wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, like, you know, it's been a long time since we've had an election. That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also.
Trump's former Vice President Mike Pence was among those who swiftly rebuked the remarks. Mr. President, Ukraine did not start this war, Pence stated, emphasizing that Russia launched an unprovoked and brutal invasion, claiming hundreds of thousands of lives. The road to peace must be built on the truth. Across the Atlantic, British politicians expressed dismay at Trump's characterization of Zelenskyy. Former Foreign Secretary James cleverly called on the UK government to challenge Trump's stance. The USA is a friend and ally, but we must be honest and courageous when we disagree. President Trump is wrong about President Zelensky and Ukraine, and the Foreign Secretary should say so. Kemi Badenoch, leader of the UK's Conservative Party, also weighed in, reaffirming Britain's unwavering support for Ukraine. President Zelensky is not a dictator. He is the democratically elected leader of Ukraine who bravely stood up to Putin's illegal invasion, she said. Badenoch also echoed Trump's call for Europe to increase defense spending, noting, "The PM will have my support to increase defense spending. There is a fully funded plan to get to 2.5 sitting on his desk. That should be the bare minimum." Many observers have raised concerns about Trump's remarks in the broader context of his relationship with Vladimir Putin. Lord Dannatt, a former head of the British Army, warned that Trump and Putin are trying to bully Zelensky into having an election in order to install a pro-Moscow president. Other analysts have gone further, suggesting that Trump's rhetoric could undermine NATO's deterrence posture. Trump seems to be psychologically under Putin's influence. Why? This is a disaster for the UK, for Europe, for Ukraine, and the US, one senior official stated. Ever since World War II, the Russians, now with Chinese support, have tried to break the link between the US and Europe. If this happens, the Ukraine war will widen. Putin will attack NATO states in the Baltic. These are dangerous days. Zelensky himself has responded to Trump's accusations, dismissing them as a product of Russian disinformation. He is trapped in a Russian disinformation bubble, the Ukrainian president asserted, making it clear that Kyiv would not be swayed by the former president's rhetoric. Ukraine, which has been under martial law since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, postponed its scheduled 2024 elections as a wartime necessity. Nevertheless, Zelensky remains widely supported by international allies, who view his leadership as crucial to the country's survival against Russian aggression. When Trump positioned himself as President of the United States, his stance on Ukraine is likely to remain a contentious issue in both American and international politics, with U.S. and European leaders pushing to sustain military aid to Kyiv. Trump's rhetoric could have far-reaching consequences, not just for the war in Ukraine, but for the broader balance of power between NATO and Russia.